Thank you for joining us for another edition of the Deals for Dentists podcast. And today we have Danielle Mckinley of PCI HIPAA. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you can go to Deals for Dentists and you can find PCI HIPAA's promo offer, which is get a free HIPAA risk assessment, HIPAA and OSHA all in one place. So that's awesome. So Danielle, tell me all about PCI HIPAA and how you help dentists.
Sure. So PCI HIPAA was created to simplify compliance. Basically, none of us were taught how to file our taxes in school, and doctors were not taught how to be HIPAA compliant, OSHA compliant, and there's a lot of risk that comes with not being compliant. So we created a solution to take that burden off of doctors' shoulders and allow them to really focus where they want to focus, which is treating patients and enjoying their personal life.
Okay, that's awesome. And so you must have been doing this for a while because you actually are known as the HIPAA Chick. Is that right?
Yeah, that is a nickname that was given to me many years ago. And you know how nicknames go, sometimes they stick. And that one definitely stuck. So I have been helping practices for over a decade. I've consulted thousands of practices on HIPAA compliance and have helped them streamline and simplify.
Okay, your nickname is way better than mine. In high school, my nickname was Blocky. So my friends are very, very uncreative, but
So
that
that one
stuck as
didn't
well.
stick then.
Oh, I'm still Blocky.
You're
Yeah.
still Blocky?
So
okay,
I'm
so
still
can
Blocky.
I call you Blocky then?
You can.
Okay, new names.
So tell us about compliance and what kind of changes have been going on that dental practices should know about.
Yeah, so here's the thing, compliance is ever changing. So that's what makes it really challenging is the laws are always evolving. Some of the big changes right now, there's an initiative about the access control policies and procedures. That's a big part of what changes, things that, your staff needs to be aware of when they go through the annual HIPAA training. So it's something that is always changing. And that's what makes it tough because Health and Human Services doesn't reach out and say, hey, these are the changes you need to be aware of. It's really up to the doctors to go and research. And that just isn't practical.
It's not just a one-time thing, set and forget it. It's constantly evolving. And does this happen on the state and federal level?
It does. Yeah. So we're nationwide. We work with all states. And usually what happens at the state level is things are a little more stringent. Like, for example, the breach notification rule, the timelines in which you have to execute certain parts of that legislation are usually tighter on the state level.
So the breach notification rule. So is that if we get hacked or there's some data or patient information that is hacked or some type of ransomware? Is that what that is?
Yeah, so the breach notification rule can be triggered a number of ways. The most prominent for sure right now is through cybercrime. So things like ransomware, malware, phishing scams, but then it can also happen through the next biggest one I would say is theft, and then human error. Human error is a large cause of both of those items because humans aren't perfect, and it's not uncommon for a team member to click on something that creates a mess within a practice.
Actually, my mom, Judy, told me I'm perfect. So, but,
Not everyone can be like you, Blocky.
I know it's, yeah. So, now when you say human error, does that mean like someone's opened up a suspicious email?
Yeah. So, we get cyber criminals are very intelligent. They often will kind of lurk within the environment to see, okay, what names do team members often open emails from? Usually the doctor or the CEO, right? And so they'll send an email that looks legitimate and the email will read from that person's name. But if you actually take an extra second to click on it to see the full email address, you'll find that it's not actually from that person.
Okay. So just be very careful on what emails you open, but also train your staff to be suspicious of emails.
Yeah, so staff training is a huge part of how you protect yourself and you put those proactive measures in place, is teaching them, what to look for. And really just, my advice is always take the extra second. If something doesn't feel right, take the extra second to check it out.
Okay. So what's like a typical thing a practice can do to improve their compliance status, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, my go-to answer for that is always take a risk assessment. So a
Mhm.
risk assessment is something you should be doing every year. That's really how you gain that awareness to the changes that we talked about, right? And it's how you'll get an overall score or health check on the overall compliance of your practice. And then from there, when you review it, you'll walk away really understanding, okay, this is where I might be all right. Here's where I have some gaps, and then you'll have a corrective action plan for how to address the gaps that are uncovered.
So is this risk assessment, this is something that you provide, um, is this required every year per state or on the federal level, or is it just more for our own sake to be safe and secure?
It is required. So, in the event of like an audit or an investigation, that's going to be one of the first things that your practice is asked for, because then Health and Human Services knows, okay, if they don't have a risk assessment, the chances of them having the compliance requirements in line are slim. So that is the cha-ching. They know that they can get you with some penalties if you don't have that at a minimum.
Okay. Can you tell me about some myths about compliance? And is there actually a HIPAA police that shows up?
Yeah, so Health and Human Services and Office for Civil Rights is where it is enforced. That's the regulating party that comes in and actually enforces the penalties. And so the HIPAA police, there used to be a lot more like boots on the ground, if you will. It's unlikely that someone's going to walk into your practice today and say, "Hey, let me see your HIPAA manual." Right? How it happens is utilizing desktop audits. So you'll receive an email, just like think of it like an IRS audit where you receive the formal letter. So it'll be a formal letter or an email that says you're being audited by Health and Human Services, and they'll usually ask for a minimum of 10 items that you have to produce within a certain time frame. And if you can't produce them, or you don't have them, or you don't meet that timeline, that's when the penalties start to stack up.
And that email, will that come from the Health and Human Services? Is that federal or is that state?
That's federal. So
Okay.
Health and Human Services Office for Civil Rights is going to be at the federal level. The state attorney general is who enforces at the state level.
Can you imagine the irony if that was a suspicious email and you clicked on it and you let in some malware?
Oh, I'm
Um,
sure it's happened. I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure it has.
yeah. I mean, it, are cyber? Would you call them cyber criminals? Is that the term for them for people that hack into your network?
Yep, cyber criminals.
Are they just like constantly evolving as well and are always like one step ahead of the game?
I would say 10 steps. I mean, if you speak to any IT provider or professional that's actually going in and cleaning up the virus and removing it, every single day they're encountering a new kind. They are always thinking, they're thinking with their criminal mind. So they're always 10 steps ahead. So we always use the term, it's better to be like, how you prepare is by being proactive and planning for it and not waiting for it to happen and then trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah, I watched that show, Mr. Robot, so I'm quite informed about cyber
I
criminals.
haven't seen that yet, but I have heard things about it, so I should probably check it out.
Yeah, it's a must watch. You can binge watch it. Um, all right, so let's just say I open up a suspicious email, and then what happens? Does my whole practice management software just shut down? Are there many different types of ransomware? Can you explain what happens typically?
Yeah, so there's many different types, and you're not going to know by looking at your computer which virus they've installed to hold your information hostage. So when you're hit with ransomware, what happens is the virus gets into your system, it locks down all of your devices. So if you have laptops on your network, desktop computers, iPads, those are all be locked down if they're synced up to your network. And there'll be a message on it that says, hey, we've got your data and you need to pay X amount of dollars by this time, or the fee goes up to X. And they usually ask for, a reasonable amount of money because their goal is to get you to pay.
Are we talking like real money or is this cryptocurrency?
Usually cryptocurrency. They want you to pay in Bitcoin.
Okay, so since cryptocurrency evolved, has that been like a game changer?
Yeah, I mean, it's got pros and cons, definitely, but anyone that's in this space of responding to those, they own cryptocurrency. So that, because sometimes the only path forward is to pay the ransom and then get the proper, that's the last resort. So let me be clear on that. You don't want to pay it. That is the absolute last resort. So providers that are in this space, we all have cryptocurrency.
Okay. So how does that work? I mean, the first thing is to be protected, and protect yourself. Um, would I have to go out and buy cryptocurrency? Do you help us with that? What's the process there?
Yeah, no, we help with that. So that's why we have cryptocurrency. So after we work down the process of recovery, if it's determined that the only way to recover from this is the ransomware, that's what it's there for. So we actually have insurance that covers that for our clients. But really, the front line of defense and what you should check in terms of like being proactive is your data backup solution. You want to
Mm.
make sure that you have a multiple redundant backup solution, and we recommend that you isolate them. So don't have all of your eggs in one basket with one vendor. It's best practice to have two backup solutions, like one with your IT provider, for example, and then we offer a secondary. So having two different providers so that if, because IT companies are compromised all the time, that's becoming more and more common. And that has a downstream effect to their clients. So having multiple redundant backup solutions is your best line of defense when it comes to cybercrime.
Now, are cyber criminals, are they trying to target large DSOs versus like a solo practitioner, or they will target anyone?
They will target anyone. So the reason that they love the healthcare space is because think about within like your practice, how many patient records do you have? The information, so there's two things that are going on. One, they're trying to get you to pay a ransom fee so they can get some fast cash, right? But if you take long enough, they can infiltrate your system and then extract patient information. And each patient record that they get is an identity profile that then can be sold on the black market and is worth a lot of money. So even if you're a small practice, you may have 2,000 records at any given time. And that is a very nice payday if they're able to get their hands on that information. So healthcare is by far their favorite target.
Yeah, so there's that. There's the breach, which could cause penalties. Then there's the ransomware, but then we're talking about shutting down our practice. I mean, just right there alone is a major expense. So
Right.
it's not cheap to shut down your practice, and have to handle all of this, or being locked out of your practice management software. Um, so, like you said, the multiple backup solutions, does that mean like really good solid firewalls as well?
Yeah, so firewall, antivirus, having running scans is also really important. That'll check for any vulnerabilities or open ports or maybe some irregular activity. So from like a technology standpoint and your technical safeguards, those are going to be like, you absolutely need all of what we just talked about. And then you also want to plan for, like you said, if you have downtime, like what's in your insurance policy? Does it reimburse you for profit loss? Who are you going to call when something happens? Do you have a support team? Do you understand at all the breach notification requirements? And, if any of the listeners have questions about those things, that's all stuff that we can help you coordinate and get an understanding of how to implement. That's going to be key to quick recovery, minimal downtime, minimal revenue loss, and making sure that your patients, that you retain their trust too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that too, where you could actually lose patients because they don't trust you anymore. So if there's a breach, then do we have to let every patient in our practice know?
You do. And then if it's over 500 records, it also has to be public. So you have to do like a press release. It has to be in some form of media, and some states have different requirements. But yeah, you do. So you start with a forensic investigation that is going to determine, how the incident happened, how much information may have been exposed, and the forensic investigator will give you a data set that says, okay, these are the patients that you must notify. And then you have to do that formally in writing, and you want to make sure that you're working with an expert to draft that, because you want to keep your patient feeling good about the scenario and show them that you're doing everything to protect their information. So you're going to provide them things like identity theft monitoring and insurance to protect their information that may have been exposed.
So when you say we have to make this public, do we have to actually sending everyone an email, or is there do we have to post it on social media?
So it'd be like in a media outlet. So
Mhm.
usually like a press release, or in some like a newspaper, or any sort of article. So depending on where you are, you'd be given like the options for how you make it public. You only have to make it public knowledge if it's over 500 records. So like if you go, if you pull up, anyone can pull up the HIPAA wall of shame. So if you pull up Google and you Google HIPAA wall of shame, it'll pull up a portal that shows all the different breaches, what type they were, the number of records that were affected. And you'll notice that all of those are going to be over 500 records. So your practice would also show up on that list as well.
So what's your typical cyber criminal looking for? How much are they trying to squeeze out of my office?
It really depends. I've seen as low as like 5,000. I've seen 120,000. It's usually like 20 to 40, I would say, is what we're seeing mostly now, 20 to 40,000 in Bitcoin.
Does that depend on how many records they get?
Sometimes I feel like it's a free for all. Honestly, I feel like they, depending on where they've had success in the past, I think is where they start. And there's so many that's why we see stuff all over the place.
So you mentioned insurance. Do you provide that, or is that something I get from a third party? How does that work?
We do. So our solution is designed to like basically be a one-stop shop that gets a practice compliant, keeps them compliant. If something happens, our response team steps in and handles all of the cleanup so that you don't have that downtime. And then our insurance prevents the losses. So it covers for things like, in a ransomware attack, your average downtime is going to be 3 to 7 business days. So that's a lot of revenue out the door, right? So it has profit loss reimbursement built into it so that it's not a total loss for you.
And now, do you offer this for DSOs, solo practitioners, multi-location offices? And this is, you said, nationwide?
Yes. Yep. So the only we specialize, like we built our business to advocate for the private practice. So that is how we designed the solution, but we work with a number of DSOs, a ton of multiple locations. We have thousands of practices nationwide. And really what we don't touch is hospitals. And we're predominantly in the dental space. 80% of our users are dental specific.
Oh, can you imagine the ransom at a hospital with all those records?
Oh,
It
yeah.
must be, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So can you actually make our practice bulletproof and help us, really be protected so I can sleep at night so I don't have to worry about this? Because I don't think I'm going to be able to sleep after this conversation. But can you make that happen where I can, sleep well at night knowing that PCIHIPAA has my back?
Yeah, so that's what we do is we get you the peace of mind. Now, no one's bulletproof. You could spend billions of dollars with us, with IT providers, with tons of safeguards, and something can still happen to you. So rather than saying we're going to make you bulletproof, we say we're going to make you prepared, and then we're putting financial protection in place to prevent any losses. So a large part of your financial risk comes from being non-compliant, which is why we do the work to get you compliant and keep you there. And then if something happens, you have a team to call that's going to take care of it. And you can rest assured that you're protected.
Okay. What about as far as protection, cloud versus a server base? Right now, we have this behemoth of a server that's under one of the desks of the front office. Um, but we're eventually going to go cloud. Is there a difference in protection? Should I actually be nervous switching to the cloud, or am I going to be more protected with the cloud?
Yeah, I mean, look, there you don't need to have any reservations about moving to the cloud. The technology is so advanced now. You want to make sure that you have multi-part authentication so that there's two encryption keys. You want to make sure that the solution you're using for cloud backup has like military grade encryption, which is starting at 256-bit. And while you're working through that transition, you want to make sure that your server is encrypted. You want to make sure that it's locked down so someone can't break into the office and physically take the server with them. And if you can't, if you can't get it under lock and key, figure out a way to keep it locked to where it's located while you work through that transition. But definitely don't need to have any reservations about moving to the cloud. I would recommend that you have a cloud backup. Like if you're backing up in your practice today just with external hard drives, let's say, you want to have a local backup, which would be that external hard drive, and a cloud backup. Because devices like our phones, our computers, they become faulty, and so do those hard drives. And most practices aren't testing them weekly to make sure that they're working properly.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you also mentioned penalties. Why would I get a penalty? Is that because I haven't properly trained my staff? We don't have a rock solid manual or handbook. Is that something that we could get penalized for?
Yeah, all of the above. So the non-compliance penalties typically range between 10,000 and up to 1.5 million. So huge range again, because there's so many moving parts. So definitely you can get penalized for not having proper policies and procedures. There's actually been a lot of penalties this year on that access rights control that I mentioned at the beginning, which is an initiative by Health and Human Services this year. So things like your employee access policy, your patient access policy, your physical access policy, those sorts of things. And then definitely staff training is a big area where penalties can come from, because human error is the main cause of breaches, and then also complaints that lead to an investigation where Health and Human Services is then like, hey, let me see your risk assessment, let me see your HIPAA manual, let me see the training for XYZ team member. And if you can't produce those things, or if you have them and they're out of date, that leads to the penalties.
So that you recommend to do this every year and have a new report done every year?
Yeah, so the purpose of the risk assessment is so that you can get an awareness of the changes, right? Because the other way to get that knowledge is to go do the research. And doctors and office managers don't have time to do that, right? So a risk assessment is a surefire way to make sure that you're assessing, hey, did we miss an update? Is there something that changed that we're not aware of?
Yeah, so not only do you have to be so careful in the protection of data and health history and patient information, but like you're saying, you have to prove that if you do get investigated, you have to prove that you've properly taken the steps and you've trained your staff and everyone's aware of all the requirements. So, um, and then what about, let's just say something, a little something happened and I didn't report it, and then what happens then?
Yeah, so if you don't report it and then something comes of it, because when information is exposed, and then their identity is taken. So if you have like an identity theft restoration solution, part of that process is they're going to pinpoint how it happened, because they want to see if there's others out there. And so if that's traced back to you, that's big dollars, because you didn't follow the breach notification requirements.
So what's like the most expensive or catastrophic incident you've seen in your day?
So, I've been pretty fortunate because I'm on like the proactive side, right? So
Yeah.
I'm on the side that's minimizing incidents. So the worst one that I've seen though is a client that came to us after the fact, and they were a victim of one of the IT providers that was hit, and it ended up costing them 195,000. They had some safeguards in place, but had they been, say, on our program, they wouldn't have had any out-of-pocket expense. So I don't see a lot of the devastation. I read about it a lot, but I don't have like that firsthand experience with it because I'm on the side that's helping prevent that from happening for practices.
Wow. That is scary. And now, do you do all this virtually? Or did you used to actually go into offices and now it's all virtual? How does that work?
No, so we're ahead of the game with the virtual services. So like I said, we advocate for the private practice. We're trying to keep costs low. We're trying to make an affordable solution that checks all of the boxes. And part of that is being able to do it virtually. So when you're looking at like if for practices that, let's say you have an on-site HIPAA person or an on-site OSHA person, those practices end up saving money on our program because we're able to consolidate the vendors and we do everything remote. So it brings the cost down tremendously.
Now, are we legally required to have one dedicated employee that is in charge of OSHA and compliance?
Yeah, so it is a requirement that you designate a point person. And there's actually a policy that lives in your HIPAA manual that says who that point person is. And then if they leave or transition, that document always needs to be updated.
Okay. Awesome. The HIPAA Chick, Danielle Mckinley of PCI HIPAA. Again, you can go to Deals for Dentists and take a free HIPAA risk assessment today. HIPAA and OSHA all in one place. Danielle, anything I didn't ask you or something that I missed that you want to tell the dentists out there?
No, I think we had a great conversation. I mean, I think that the one thing is like, don't walk away feeling scared. Compliance doesn't have to be complicated. There are resources out there. Go find a resource. The biggest players in the game, so to speak, are experts at delegating. So compliance is definitely something within your practice that you should think about or highly consider delegating. So look into some of the support and the resources and don't make this like a stressor or feel like a huge burden because it doesn't have to be.
Awesome. Delegating is actually my favorite word. I love that word, delegating.
Yeah.
And this is just something that dentists, we don't know the first thing about compliance and HIPAA. You need to go out there and get someone to back you up like PCI HIPAA. Don't try to do this all yourself. So Danielle, again, thank you so much for joining us. Let's be in touch.
Yes, my pleasure. Have a nice day.
You too. Take care.